Alright, so new Murovanka, top tier E50M. So what I always do when at the start of these games, I look at the comp, right? So you're the only real fast tank over here on this side. I mean, they have a 5100. This is actually really good tiering for you because see how there's 4 tier 10s and then 1 tier 9 and then everything is 8s. Basically a weight of 8. That's really good. That means that you can usually bully a lot of people that you run into, especially if you hang on, I turned off the thing accidentally. There we go. Especially if you don't run into like their E100s or the IS7. So you can actually play this either way. You can go and spot early on this side, even in the E50M, or you can play this side. You just don't want to typically go into the middle early on. But we'll have to see what their team does and how your team disperses. Oh, I forgot that the mini-map always changes in these things. So it looks like you're heading east. So it's like right about this time is when I start looking at, I expand my mini-map and I look and see what's going on. So right, you see a bunch of your heavies going west. You've got a couple of low heavies going east, right? An IS-3 and your STI. But the majority of your weight's going over to this west side, which is what heavies do a lot. And they tend to camp around this area back here, which is not really that good. If you ever see me play a heavy from the south on this side, I try to get up into this village right here because it's actually pretty useful, as long as you can get just a small bit of a supporting fire. You took a little bit too long to get here. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to be in a position more forward right now where you can get better shots on these guys. And then see how the T-71, he went too deep, but see how he spotted all these guys right here? So they've already got the good position in the forest. So you actually don't want to be anywhere from this G line to this J line. Oh, man, my mouse keeps resetting. From the G line to the J line, because there's a big no man's land there. And so once they have that forest, especially when you see like their IS-7 is in there, it's going to be difficult for you to take on an IS-7 frontally. So you should probably go just completely turn around, go around over to this west side and try to make sure that your team can push on this other side. Yeah, especially since you see how you could get to the backside of this engagement over here. You still don't want to just drive in here frontally. That's not going to be very profitable for you for in most cases. I mean, obviously you win this game, so it works. But when you look at this setup, this is not the setup that you want to drive into. Yeah, there's a lot of low tier 8 tanks in there. There's a lot of light tanks, but there's also an IS-7 in there. And even if there wasn't, we're talking about 6-on-1. That's not the type of engagement that you want to create. What you want to be able to create is a sort of a flanking engagement, particularly when you have a couple of your higher tier tanks over here, where you can cause pressure over on this side of these guys. It's a trap! So you're still not in a very good position. Yeah, you can shoot against 8s, but the problem is that there's so many of them, and arty and things like that, and you don't really have any fire support. Luckily, this IS-7 does not want to shoot you. So at this point, you still have an opportunity. Even see where these guys are right now. That's even a better position than where you are, because basically you're fronting these guys, and that's not really what you want to be able to do. Yeah, you're a top tier tank, but you want to be someplace where you can make use of the fact that you actually have an accurate gun and a relatively quick tank. You're basically playing it like a heavy right now. And see how these guys, this guy, he YOLO'd a little bit too much, but see how like this IS-3 is on this backside? That IS-3 is going to get some great shots where he's at. And if you were over there with your DPM, you'd be able to own a lot of these guys. Because right now, what shots have you really gotten other than on that IS-3? Not a whole lot. And Artie's shot at you 3 different times so far. So that's one of the things that you should also do. Whenever you're in a position for a while like this, I mean, take note. I mean, you should know that Artie's looking at you because Artie's tried to shoot you 3 different times. And so that's something that you have to sort of keep track of as well. People, particularly a lot of Unicums always complain about artillery, but a lot of it is because they do what you're doing right now. You're basically rocking back and forth in the same area, and you've been here for the past 2 minutes. And it's like, well, and you know that Artie's been shooting at you, so it's like, well, what did you expect? Again, 4. And then again, this is the same. This is a situation where you can still get out of here if you wanted to. You could leave at any time that you want.
It's a trap!
Although, I would argue, now that that IS-7 is down, you actually might have been better off pushing, but that's neither here nor there. They've probably got a lot of stuff behind them. So what you do know is that you could still come up over through this inside here, particularly through this 4 line, and probably be relatively covered. Yeah, once you're over into this sort of center area, you don't really get good shots on these guys unless they push in. So see where that T-32 is? See where your T-32 is? That's where you should have been like 2 minutes ago. Or that's at least, you know, you should be up there with that T-32. You're never going to get that shot. Like, that shot does not exist. So you should still, at this point, go over to where this T-32 is. See, these guys are just going to counter push into that T-32 now, because he doesn't actually have enough fire support over there.
It's a trap!
So that T-32 on that other side is gone now. You can still split the middle there, but I don't think that that's a good option at this point.
It's a trap!
LOL. E-100 shooting HE. Shoot the other E-100. Shoot, because your T-32 is still alive. Your T-32 is still alive. The other E-100 has its ass to you, which increases the chance that you'll actually get a fire shot. And this E-100 is shooting HE. All of those things sort of, the confluence of that event suggests that you should shoot the other guy. Although now the other E-100 is going to be occupied, or no longer occupied, so that's no longer a viable option.
It's a trap!
LOL, both of the E-100s are firing HE. Oh look, that guy switched to AP. And both of the RD are still shooting at you, so that's something to keep track of. There's somebody on the cap, but you don't really have to worry about the cap. It's obviously the Bulldog, and probably the Type's not going to be very far behind them, would be my guess. And then at this point, Artie is still your greatest enemy. You'd actually probably rather go to the south side of that house and get shot at by that Tiger 2 and the Bulldog, right? You put your frontal armor to those guys. Because you know that shot tells you that there's at least one Artie in like A1, A2, which you should have assumed already anyways.
It's a trap!
You can counter push that E100 to the north. So right now, what you do know is that there's a Tiger 2 who's not going to be one shot for you. The E100 is one shot for you. You just need to get yourself in a position where you can get a good shot on him.
It's a trap!
Lol. So you have to assume that that E100 is going to be pushing south there, so you're going to have to keep an eye out for that. And you have to keep yourself behind the house, because
It's a trap!
when you turn your turret to the side like that, there's a chance that you can get shot. And again, I still feel like you would have been better off on the south side of this house rather than the north, because it would give you a lot more artillery protection. You've gotten very lucky to this point because you haven't gotten hit by artillery significantly. I mean, one of them hit you for 450, but yeah. And you can do what you're doing. You can also go south to the K line to spot it, right? You got 50 seconds, you have plenty of time. You can also go up to the F line to spot it if you want. I don't know. I don't really think that was a lucky shot on the E100. I mean, he had a flat turret face to use, so that I think that shot was fine. And you're gonna have to go over, because if he's behind the house, it's gonna be difficult for you. See how he's... Oh, you have to reset. Lol. He was positioned pretty poorly. Yeah, but the APCR, particularly from that range, has more than enough penetration to go through the flat front of the E100, even without hitting the police bar. I guess what I'm saying is that it wasn't like that was an impossible shot. So yeah, you should actually probably come over through the east side of the cap. Not that it probably matters, this is 2 artillery. But yeah, to this area where you're going right now. You get better shots on them, and it's going to be more difficult for them to counter you. Whenever you're in a cap situation like this, you should always look at the time and figure out whether you have enough time, right? From this side of the cap, there's nowhere that they can hide. They can't really hide from, you know, behind a building or anything like that. So it becomes really easy to take them out.
It's a trap!
And so if you actually had a little bit more time there, like you could have backed up through that bush and then used that as a double bush, well, a single bush as to block that you from getting lit there. You had plenty of time for that. All right, so what did I see happen? That was fine. It took you a little bit too long to get over to this east side, in my opinion. It's not really that big of a deal because you did have that T-71 in front of you to spot. But barring that, you sometimes, if you get up to this sort of ridge right here, you can at least see their guys coming through this middle here. You don't have to commit to come in here, but you can actually see them get into this area. And then you can decide, right, because there's this whole ridge line right there. And then if you don't like what you see, like if you see 8 tanks there, you can just be like, all right, and then you can just leave. But you should always consider that as far as that option. And then you kind of push forward here when I really didn't think that was going to be advantageous for you or for your side in general. You're lucky that they were pretty oblivious. That IS-7 like was entirely oblivious to your position. He was actually the greatest probable threat to you. But when you moved up here, it was actually kind of a precarious position. But you did eventually leave, which was smart in my opinion. I still think like their weakest point on the map was right here. Those 2 E100s could have been easily pushed and flanked through where that T-32 went, essentially. And the nice thing about the mid game is that pushing through this middle here, usually this area up here is cleared out. You can always check. You can check whether they have, you know, there's that little like tower right there. You can check through that entire area by coming up on this ridge right here, and you can spot into that area. Otherwise, I think you need to probably play a little bit more cognizant of when artillery is shooting at you, particularly when you were in this F9 position. You need to be aware that they literally took 4 different shots at you while you were there. And one of the complaints that a lot of people have in a particular unit comes about artillery is that artillery will focus you. It's like, well, what do you expect the artillery to do? And if you know they're shooting at you, you have to kind of make a little bit more of a concerted effort to make those shots difficult for them to hit. And it was the same sort of situation over here. Like any one of those artillery could have splashed you to kill you when you were on this house, but it was that Tiger 2 was going to have difficulty penning you because he was not a very good player, and the Bulldog and the what was it, the Type? Oh no, the Bulldog died. The Type that was over here is going to have a lot of difficulty penning you frontally, but if any of those artillery splashed you, you could have died. So that's something to consider as well. I mean, obviously you did really well. I mean, you did what, like 8k damage, so it's kind of hard to complain about the results. But if you want to look at nitpicking sort of little things about what you can potentially do better, that's what I would say. Oh, sorry, I forgot that I was looking at the Firefox. Anyhow, I usually just scroll back through chat when I go between rounds. So these are the stats for the game. So one thing is that you were actually pretty efficient with shots. I know you go, well, you got 24 pens for 35 shots, but from the ranges and the types of shots that you had, that's actually not that bad. So from a technical proficiency, I thought you did really well there. The only thing is that, again, my critique is more about your defensive play than your offensive play. But GG. So what's the problem in chat exactly? Yeah, but so you're always looking at, and the reason why it's easier to look at like close losses is that you can always look at something and say, well, if you had done this, then it would be taking from a close loss to a close win. And it's the same thing, although most people don't think of it like this. Like if you take a close win, if you did some things right easier, it would be an easy win. And so there's a lot of games that are like that, and a lot of it happens where, like, if you look at this game, and again, not taking anything away from the game, I mean, the guy obviously had a great game, but if you look at this game, like, if he was able to keep some of his teammates alive, maybe he wouldn't have needed to do 8k damage. And maybe it would have just been an easy win, rather than him, to an extent, getting lucky for not getting hit by artillery. But again, I think artillery fire goes either way. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. But I think, like, if you look at these wins, I mean, even if you were to like 15-0 somebody, it doesn't mean that you can't find something where you're just like, oh, if I had done this differently, this would have been easier. And I think that if you just look for small things to improve, I mean, I would rather have this, where I have a really, really close game that I win, but I learn something from it, than to have a very, very close game that I lose, that I learned something from. So, I mean, but you should still try to take something away from it, in my opinion. I don't really think that there is a best artillery in the game. I think they're all kind of crappy, not in a playstyle sense, but just in an efficiency sense. The problem with artillery, and again, so people don't like artillery, and I get that, and that's fine. But artillery in its current iteration is, for most people, too dependent on RNG, and it's not really. There's not as much sort of planning involved in it as you might think. Like when you make strategies for maps, and you sort of put artillery on it, and you're sort of basically looking to control certain lanes of fire, so you position your artillery accordingly, and that's sort of why artillery is used in an organized setting. So like if you do clan wars on not every map, but on a lot of maps, there's at least one artillery, unless you have a complete YOLO strat. And so in that setting, artillery is useful because you can use it to control a lane, and you sort of construct your defense or your offense around that lane. But in pub matches, artillery is less effective, and that's why I generally don't play artillery in when I solo pub. Because you don't sort of have that sort of same, not everybody is playing the same game plan, and so you kind of have to be able to read and react more. And so the nerfs that they did to artillery in 8.6, which was basically a rate of fire nerf and an accuracy nerf, basically made it so that playing artillery in pubs does not have the same return as playing a regular tank, a medium tank, or a heavy tank, or even a light tank. Can I mind a shotgun 304 battle? I think 304 battles are hilarious, but yeah, maybe not right now. Okay, so anyways, let's carry on with our replays. We've got a few more here. Another E50M. So Platoon, Malinovka, top tier, standard. They've got a lot of tank destroyers. That's actually pretty good. So they don't actually have much that could potentially challenge you on the hill. Hill's sort of fallen out of favor on this map a lot for pubby meta, anyways. A lot of people like playing this side. I don't really think that side's nearly as effective as people think it is. I mean, it's okay in pubs, but you can generally dominate in this area. And since you have the speed to do it, I would probably take the E50M up here and see what's up there, see what's going up there at least. And again, you have to see what your team does, how they disperse to one side or the other, and that'll sort of help you figure out what exactly, how you're going to amend your game plan. So it's like, right about now is when I start looking. So you have some guys going over here, which is fine. You don't actually have anything too heavy. Your T-57 is going over there. That's not a very good play for T-57. It's really easy for that guy to get killed, and he probably will. You got most of your team going east, which is good. That's what I would do. Yeah, if you link replays right now, I mean, well, people on the channel are going to get spammed, but I'm not going to notice it, so it's going to get ignored. So yeah, the 1375 died, and that it's a rough position to play. You see how they didn't push their team across, at least as far as we can tell. If you can sit a 1375 on that rock, but then he's basically ISO'd there, so he's out of position. So there's a bulldog up top. So the only problem with the bulldog, nice shot. The only problem with the bulldog being right there is that they have a CGC, and the CGC has likely already fired a shot down there, but he'll definitely re-aim to where you're at. There he is. And you can get behind the windmill. One of the things that I always do is whenever somebody with a long reload, an artillery, or even like the FE-183 fires, I always look in the upper right-hand corner at the time, and I think about when they're gonna reload. So you have this 30-second window here where,
It's a trap!
that was unexpected. I wasn't expecting to see a 268 there, to be quite honest. But you should be able to abuse that. Let your E5 do a little bit of work. You can actually fire around right where you're going right now, around this side of the house. Don't move any more forward. You can fire right through there and not be lit. If you just fire around the edge of the house, just barely around the edge of the house, you should be able to shoot him without being lit. Yep. And so see their position where they're at, how they're kind of halfway up the hill. That's not how you want to be caught on this map if you're on their team. Their IS-7 is pushing forward, but that's not too much of a problem. Now see where your your E5 buddy is over on your left. He should actually be in your position because basically he's artillery bait because he's much slower and they have a decent artillery player. Shoot the D30. And you have decent artillery, so it's just a matter of keeping these guys lit. And, you know, taking shots of opportunity. Take shots when, you know, nobody's shooting at you. And you know there's that waffle there, so you should either be shooting the waffle, and you shouldn't be shooting a tiger, you shouldn't be prioritizing the Tiger 2 over a waffle. And if you know the waffle's there, you should be switch over to HE.
It's a trap!
Lol, that waffle's still there. That waffle's just like got a death wish. Nice work. And you can actually probably get shots on the 268. Again, the Tiger 2 should be less of a priority to you than the tier 10s. If assuming that you actually have a shot. I don't know that you have a shot on that 268. But if you did, it would be worth it to shoot the 268. And so, generally speaking, like from that particular angle that you're at, you want to shoot just a little bit more to the right and a little bit up from where you shot at that 268, because where you typically auto bounce is through that sort of middle area, and if your shot happens to stray high, then you can at least, you know, you can still catch that little bar, the radar bar on the top. Man, I don't know why your artillery has... I mean, I don't know, I'll have to look at the stats, but I don't know why your artillery has not had more of a field day with these guys. And you're having trouble shooting the IS-7, so I would actually focus on the 268. And it's one of those things where if you know that you have difficulties shooting certain tanks, then you should... Like, you could have just as easily had a shot on that 268 rather than that IS-7, and you would have been able to hit him. I'm kind of surprised that shot didn't go through. It must have hit him at an extreme auto bounce angle. And so, yeah, shoot a little bit more into the upper right quadrant. If you're at that sort of angle, see how he turned away from you. You have to remember that the cheeks of the front of the 268 are kind of cupped. I'll show you guys in the client afterwards. But whenever they turn from one side to the other, you can actually it's kind of like a shell catch there that you can just shoot into. And so you want to be careful here. See how you guys are starting to push off this hill? That's not necessarily good. You know, they've still got a lot of tank destroyers and an artillery. So that's kind of a risky play.
It's a trap.
Oh, you're like 1 for 8 on that IS-7. And I think the 1 was like into the side armor. And careful here, because like you should have stopped at the church right there. Because see how you cross through this area right there? That 183 could have easily just dapped you, and that would have been your game. And you still can. Oh. And so you have an entire mass of guys that are behind you that every single one of them has more health than you. So at this point, you want to be a little bit more conservative, and you don't want to cluster like this. See how these guys are clustered? You're going to get hit by something that's not even meant for you. And yeah, so going over to this side is good because you can get to this area. You don't need to push through there. The IS-3 is already pushing, so all you have to do is just be ready to shoot when he lights. Which looks like drowning people. So concern yourself with the artillery, not the FE, the artillery. They'll be here. Oh my god! LOL. The other artillery is still in play, and it's likely that he's not very far away from you. And then so one of the keys to artillery, or avoiding artillery, remember, is you always want to be ideally moving laterally from their line of fire. So if you think that, let's say he's in F1, you want to be moving sideways to wherever you think he is. You don't want to drive anywhere towards him. So you kind of want to drive out at one angle and then come back at another angle until you drop spot. And that's fine. Being patient right here, that's the right... Well, you should have been patient like 700 hit points ago, but that's fine at this point.
It's a trap!
And you know the CGC is out there. He's out straight ahead there someplace. Oh, he fired.
It's a trap!
There, you should have... No, so right there, you shouldn't keep pushing forward here, because you have to know that the Foch is up there. Like, the Conqueror, he's not going to be able to fire again for a while now. But that Foch, if he's loaded, or this object, he missed, is going to be able to own you. So now that the object fired, so you always have to prioritize. Now that the object fired and missed, the object is no longer, you know, a threat for X period of time. The Foch is probably reloading at this point, but... that was awesome. It was the, yeah, I killed him. Oh man, I drove off the cliff. Anyhow, I thought you did a really, really good job. I think your E5 buddy, you should talk to him, tell him that he shouldn't have been where he was. If he had moved around, even just, you know, to the other side of where you were at, he would have gotten shot, you know, just as many shots, and he would have been a lot more safe from artillery. I thought you did a good job of shooting these guys and dealing damage here. Your target priority, you always sort of have to sort of have a prioritization in mind, and there's some tanks that are just they become really critical to take out, and the Waffle in pub matches is one of them, particularly in a situation like that where you know that he's out in the open, he's exposed. You want to try to take advantage of that and be able to take him down if you can. But otherwise, I thought you did a really, really good job on the hill. I thought coming down off of the hill from this side was a little bit too aggressive, and if they were a little bit more on the ball, they could have killed you even before you got down to the church area. I think that because you know that your team was already pushing off there, I think the safer play was to either snipe from back here until your guys got to the church, which they never did because that IS-3 rammed the IS-7 or whatever it was, or come back around over here, right? And then once you were down here, you should have stopped at the church because any other tank destroyers could have owned you while you were still lit from that IS-7. You were safe behind the church. And then again, pushing into that FE 183, that FE 183, when you were right here, the FE 183 was right there. He got a shot on you, he bounced, but that also could have killed you because he shot an AP shell. An AP shell from 183 is going to one-shot you if it pens. So that's sort of something to keep in mind. There's a couple instances where you were appropriately aggressive early on, which is good. I mean, that's what you want to be. And then I think that you were a little bit too aggressive in certain spots here, particularly when you were one-shot to the tanks that were there. But certainly a very good game. And then again, sorry, when you were over here, target prioritization, there was not, like the Foch, let's pretend like the Foch was still loaded. There was nothing that either the Conqueror CGC or the Foch could have done to shoot you when you were on this sort of like E1 area, and you could have just sat there shooting that 704 here, because you had shots even before you started driving across there. You had shots. I mean, you auto-aimed your shots and you hit them as you were on the move, which is fine. But I mean, you could have done that exact same thing. The CGC, you know the CGC already fired, and you could have just had shots of opportunity on those guys. The Foch, there's basically a ridge between you and him. He's not going to be able to shoot you. And so instead what you did was you basically drove down between them, right? The 704, again, could have killed you if he hit you. If the Foch 155 was loaded, he could have killed you as you were pushing across there. And so that, again, is you have to kind of determine when you need to bite off a big bite. And in that particular situation, you really didn't need to be aggressive for your team. It wasn't like your team was going to lose if you didn't get to that back line. Alright, so here be the list stats. And I hope that you made your platoon mates know that you did like more than twice as much damage than both of them combined. And again, so this is similar shot efficiency to the last game, which it's okay given the tanks that you were shooting at. Some of them you didn't really have very good shots. You probably have to practice shooting an IS-7 frontally. The IS-7 armor is tricky, especially with 268 pen or whatever the pen is on this tank, on these tanks. I forget offhand. And because they buffed the side armor, like you took at least one side turret shot that I recall when he turned to like look at the E100 or something like that. You have to remember that they buffed the turret of the IS-7, so it's really difficult to penetrate the turret now, unless you've got a stupid pen gun like on a tank destroyer or something like that. So a lot of times, if you're facing an IS-7 frontally in a medium tank, you should consider what other options you have to shoot at, and I think the 268 is probably a better option for you. But again, very good game. I mean, it's just not a lot to complain about there. Well, alright, until the end when you became a charred wreck. Yeah, your T-57, let's see, he fired one shot, which he hit for 0 damage. Yeah, a lot of times, again, you can tell based upon what the dispersion is like who's gonna survive and who's not. And like you see that T-57 like meandering off in that direction, and you're like, oh yeah, we're down 1, 2, or 10. On the T-54, you want the 10C. I don't remember. Hang on. Let me just look, because I'll show you the 268 as well. Actually, now that I remember that. But like in general, like if you compare those two E50M games, like I think that even though you got slightly less experience in that Malinovka game, that you played it smarter. That you played, for the most part, I mean, until you got a little bit over aggressive in the end. And the thing is, like, when you started rolling off that Malinovka hill, the game was not determined. I mean, you guys had a lead, but I mean, the game was far from over. I guess it really felt to me like the first E50M on Murovanka, it required a little bit more anti-artillery luck, and it wasn't as much about sort of positioning or interpreting the map. And again, whatever game you win is a good game. So take these things in relativity. Oh yeah, so let's see, let's look at the T54. Especially if you're willing to fire gold, you should use you should use this gun, the D10T2C. And so a lot of the difference between these two is actually, so when you look at it, you go, oh, but this one's got higher pen for the standard AP shell. It's a little bit less accurate, which is actually kind of misleading because they're both kind of inaccurate. But the huge thing is the aim time, and a 2.9 second aim time versus 2.3 second aim time is an incredibly large difference. And so the gun handling on this gun is what makes it amazing. And if you're willing to fire heat and you learn how to fire heat, and learning how to fire heat, it's an acquired taste, because a lot of people struggle with spaced armor and heat shells because heat shells don't fare well against spaced armor. So you kind of have to change your sort of shooting algorithms about how you think about shooting certain tanks. But once you get that down, it becomes really effective to use that D10 to T2C gun with heat. I do my mediums a little bit differently from people, even the Russian mediums. Like some people in the Russian mediums say, oh, well, you need to have, what's the word I'm thinking of, camo. But I find I'd much rather have repairs than camo. Where's my T60? So this is my T62A crew, which I haven't really worked on recently. I probably should. I have like some crews that are, I mean, not close to fit skill, but a reasonable stone throw if I just did, worked on the daily every day, but I got to get around to doing it. Neither signal boosting or relaying is important for a light tank. Unless it's like a, tier 3 light tank. Oh, sorry. Anyway, so I think once you get 3 full skills, you should respec to Brothers in Arms if you don't have it. And the other things that I have, obviously, Sixth Sense. And then I prioritize repairs over camo, so I always do repair camo on my mediums. And I have Deadeye on the T62. This was from a remnant from a long time ago. You can put Snapshot on it if you want. I don't think that Snapshot... The gun handling on the Russian medium series, like the tiers 9, tier 10s, they're not really that bad. Maybe you could argue that you would want Snapshot on like the 430 and maybe like the 416, things where you actually get a little bit more dispersion on turret rotation. But the T62A doesn't really need it. But you could just as easily have Snapshot there. I don't think Deadeye really. So basically, whenever your shell travels through a module, once it gets into the tank, so if once your shell depends, right? There's different modules located in different areas in the tank, and if your shell passes through that module, there's a 27% chance that it will deal damage to it. And all Deadeye does is change that 27% chance to a 30% chance, so it gives you 3%, which actually, so technically what that means is that the rate at which you deal critical damage, so damage to modules other than the tracks are always a special case, other than the tracks, increases by about 10%. Yeah, I mean, I would do firefighting before I would do signal boosting, or like I don't really have that many good light tank crews. This is not a good example because this particular tank, I think I respec these guys off of a tank destroyer or something, and I never changed their actual skills. But anyways, no. So like if you look at, that's right. Actually, none of these guys really have radio. Even if they did have a radio, like, yeah, I don't know. None of these guys have radios, I don't think, right? So it's not like you have a radio man. So they would all be essentially alternate to something else. Like they would typically be on the commander, right? The commander doubles as the radio man, and you'd rather get almost every single commander skill rather than a radio skill. But typically for like my spotting lights, let's see if I've got any of these guys actually spec'd correctly. Not really. So typically for spotting lights, light tanks where you know you're particularly going to be doing active scouting, you'll want to have like recon, situational awareness for your radio skills earlier on. I think I do it more on medium tanks than I do on my heavy tanks. I think I have like a decent medium crew in the E50M. So you'll have situational awareness there and recon as well. Yeah, I got to go through and change a bunch of stuff before the end of the weekend. I'll do that offline though. I mean, I literally have a ton of tanks. Like here, like this is the leftmost scroll. Here we go. Scroll. Scroll. Oh man, I lost my mouse. Oh, there it is. Yeah, no, there's a lot of tanks that I gotta go through and a lot of crews that I gotta fix. Like, there's crews that are just, like, completely nonsensical in some of my tanks because I just move them over and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll respec their skills later, and then I just forget about it. Oh yeah, anyways, I wanted to say about the 2CCA. So, the problem with shooting the 2CCA from the front is, like, particularly around this sort of mantlet area. See how it's like super sloped from the front? So when he's shooting at you, when you're basically faced him like you were, it's actually kind of difficult to shoot through. There's not a whole lot of areas. Like you had one shot where he was angled like about right here, and you shot right there, and it actually bounced, which is kind of rare, but I thought that was probably the best shot that you had. But typically, whenever a 268 turns to, gives me a little bit of a side, what I'm shooting for is right here. This will give you the best number of pants is to shoot it right through this area right there. And actually, I can bring that up and hang on, let me find it. Yeah, looks like that worked. Okay, so you go, oh, but it's red there. You don't want to shoot where it's red. So you always have to take the sort of angles into account. Obviously, if you can shoot through right here, that's great, but that's actually a rather small area right there, and it's really close to some spaced armor there, so you kind of want to be able to, well, actually that is spaced armor, sorry. I always forget the stupid color coding. So, anyways, my point is that you want to shoot right through here. And so, see how it says that basically the armor is 187 millimeters, which is fine, right? And you go, oh well, why don't I just shoot right there? So the problem is that this is only 120 millimeters, but when you look at the slope from where you're at, the effective armor is 226, whereas this is only 200 here, so it's actually lower armor right here. And the problem with shooting right here, even if it was the same, because you're like, oh well, then that's not that different. The problem with shooting right here is that the more that you miss, right, because there's a certain amount of dispersion on every shot, the more that you miss around to any one side, the angle actually starts increasing exponentially. Whereas if you miss over here, there's this huge area where it's just flat. So even if you miss over here, it's all 200. So that's why whenever they're angled slightly like this to you, you want to be able to shoot right there. Shooting through the front right here, so whenever I'm faced against the 268 from the front, like if you can get a shot down here, I don't think that's a very good shot. What I still aim for is I aim for this quadrant right here, and what I find is that I can hit in there. This is not like a super shot. Like I wouldn't take this shot unless I really had nothing else. But you can hit over in here, and if your shot strays high, you can hit the bar. But that's not that great of a shot. But definitely from this angle, I always shoot high, shoot right there, and the majority of the times it'll go through. And while we're on this subject, we should talk about. So this is the E100. So it's got a 250 millimeter face to it, but it's really flat. And so when you're shooting at the E100, you also, like if you're faced at him as well, you do want to shoot like if you don't have, where this goes back to when we were talking about that E50M on Murovanka, right? The E100 is basically held down to him because he was coming around a little hill there. So what you want to be able to do is if you can, like if you have time, I try to shoot for this flat face right here, but if you don't, you want to aim up in this quadrant here because you can hit this bar, because this bar is completely squishy. And otherwise you can hit the flat part of the armor right here. And so you can go through there. Now again, that's not like a fantastic shot. That's not like a shot that you want to rely on if it's life or death. And if you have a chance, like I think there was this game on in my Object 430 on the YouTube where basically I'm shooting against a hull down E100. It's the one that's on mines, I think. There's a couple E100s in there, but basically that's sort of the area that you're shooting for, and that's the reason why when you play the E100, you always want to face away from somebody. So if you're not firing, you always want to be angled something like this, so that it's really, really difficult to start to shoot you. Yeah, you can also shoot turret ring. Turret ring is, to me, is usually a little sketchy, just because of a lot of times from the distances that you're shooting from, it's a tight shot, and so generally, like if I'm side profile or if I have somebody side profile, like an E100 side profile, whenever I place my cursor over something, like whenever I'm targeting something, let me bring up the tank. Let's see, how am I going to make a circle on this thing? Let's say I'm a certain distance away, right? And so let's say my little reticle thing says that the shot's going to land somewhere in this area here. So what I'll typically do is I'll aim a little bit high, because I know if I hit this flat side of this turret, I'll go through. But I don't want, if the shell runs too low, I don't want to hit this spaced armor area here. So I'll try to err on the side of having my shell go too high and still hit someplace that it can pen. So you always want to have your reticle someplace where you have the most, if the shell goes off in some crazy side, that you'll have the best chance of actually, even with bad RNG, of it still hitting someplace where you can pen. Like, I think the problem is that a lot of times, like for example, if you auto aim that exact same shot, that reticle is down here, and that makes it so that, oh, okay, that the shot's gonna hit, but there's like a 50-50 shot that it's just gonna, depending on what ammo you're using, that it's not gonna pan, that it's gonna get eaten by the spaced armor, or that's gonna get deflected enough by the spaced armor that it's going to auto bounce once it hits the regular armor. And it's the same thing. Like, one of the things that I've talked about in the stream before is, in terms of like the E3. So the E3 actually has this weak spot. So it was interesting. We tested it. You can actually fire underneath this gun area right here, and we tested it with a chaffee. And a chaffee can pen an E3 frontally, but the area that you have to shoot, like this was literally they were touching faces. The area that you have to shoot is so incredibly small that you're not, that's not a reliable shot. And so what you're always looking for is what's a reliable shot, not what's a 1 in 1,000 shot that's going to go through. Alright, is there any other reason why I'm in the client right now? We talked about the T54, we talked about the T68. Oh, I guess we can talk about the IS-7, huh? It's probably better to talk about the IS-7 inside the game models. Alright, so they actually made the IS-7 kind of a pain in the ass to go through. So the frontal armor isn't that. I mean, I guess it is. It's 150. It's not like super difficult to pan, particularly if you're from an increased elevation. But like from the positions where you were at, where basically you were almost level with that IS-7, it becomes really difficult to penetrate frontally. And they changed the turret size, particularly mostly on the side areas here, to make it more. How do I shift? How do I get more towards the back? Anyways, I can't change the camera position. I can only rotate the tank for some reason. So it actually becomes really, really difficult to pen through the armor. Technically speaking, if you are going to shoot at the IS-7 turret, like if he gives you full side turret, you should shoot more towards the back. I've actually had shots that actually go underneath the turret though, which is slightly annoying. But otherwise, I try not to shoot at IS-7s frontally. You can pen through this if they're, giving you that, but that generally requires a relatively close range. Otherwise, you're generally trying to go through shoulders. But see how, like, anywhere I go on the shoulder here, it's pretty tough, even from this angle. And so you'll notice, like, when you were driving past that IS-3 towards the church, I'm sorry, driving past that IS-7 towards the church, and your IS-3 was like right here face-hugging this guy, and you auto-aimed onto here, your auto-aim basically locked into this area right here, and you shot and you did 0 damage. That's sort of the problem with the IS-7, is that if you're driving by the side, you almost can't auto-aim, because almost by default the shell's going to go too low, and it's going to have a large chance to actually get eaten by the tracks or the spaced armor here. So if you're side profile with an IS-7, you need to aim for this band right here. Like, this is the good band. Either that or aim for the drive wheels. I can't quite get to the back. Right there, engine deck. But the IS-7 is actually, I have troubles with the IS-7. I'm not very good at shooting the IS-7. Well, yeah, I mean, but if you're using 400 pen to get through something, yeah, it's gonna pen. It's like if you're using the JPE 100 with heat shells, it's gonna go right through here. But I mean, yeah, that's you can still damage the IS-7 in a medium tank. It's just it's difficult to crack frontally. And that's the same thing. Is like if you're the IS-7 against a medium tank, you have to understand that he's going to struggle, and you know, depending on the range, unless he can hash you, he's going to struggle to get through. And that's what I try to talk about in the stream here and there, is that you kind of have to understand what you're up against, and if you are in a situation where you can bully somebody, you should bully them. The WZ-111, the premium tank, or the 111 dash whatever, the tier 9 tank. They're a little bit different. The 111 has the pike. The tier 9 heavy is flat. You know, see how it's like I don't have the 111, the premium 111, but it's a lot. It's more like the armor is more like the IS-3 than the tier 9 111. Where's my IS-3? Oh, there it is. See how there's like shoulders here. But I don't actually know the 111 armor layout that well, so I can't talk about it too much.